Welcome to Champion Stepdad Podcast. We are exploring the unique role of stepdads, stepfathers, and bonus dads, and how to apply performance psychology skills to become a better father figure and role model. We're building a band of brothers by focusing on empathy and accountability. Whether you interact on the Facebook group, message me direct, or just keep quiet and listen, I appreciate you and the effort you put into helping little humans grow into a productive adult humans. Join the Champion Stepdad Facebook group and build your band of brothers. I'm your host, Neil Wattier. I'm a 16-year stepdad. I'm also a resilience trainer and a performance consultant, sharing my experiences and struggles, helping you develop performance skills to be a champion stepdad. Today, we welcome back James Golden. He participated in the group conversation from episode 3. He is married with 3 kids and 2 stepkids, currently residing in Heath, Ohio. James got his start in business, consulting, and entrepreneurship at the age of 19. What started off as a part-time job has turned into a 22-year career and passion for helping municipalities across the U.S. save taxpayer dollars, maximize their annual budget, and increase the conditions of our roadways. He recently started the Golden Collective. Golden, off his last name, James Golden, Goalden, the Golden Collective. It's a Facebook group and a YouTube channel dedicated to goal-oriented high performers that live by the Golden Rule. It's free for now, so head over and join the Golden Collective. James and I touch on several topics during this episode, including the importance of being empathetic to children's experiences and understanding the importance of being on the same page with your spouse. Enjoy my conversation with James Golden. James Golden, thanks for joining me on the Champion Stepdad podcast. I should say inviting you back onto the show because you were on, I believe it was episode 3. You were on the group conversation with a couple other guys. Man, thanks for joining me back on the show.
Oh, thanks for having me, Neil. It was a lot of fun in the group-based conversation. So when you give me the opportunity, man, I'm here to help and here to have this conversation, man. There's a lot of important things that need to be out there as stepdads, man. It's a big topic, so excuse me, happy to be here.
Yeah. And we build this community on empathy and accountability, and the idea that everybody can be better at any area of their life, and using performance psychology skills, using mental skills, self-awareness, self-regulation, and self-improvement to be better. It's not about focusing on others, right? It's not about what do my stepkids need to do, or what do I need to do to make my stepkids better. This is 100% self-focused. What can we do to be better people? So coming from your background, what does that make you think of? Where do you go to first?
Man, that's a tough one. It was ingrained in me at an early age, what gets measured gets improved. And when I take a look at that from a business perspective, on the entrepreneur and business side of the house, that's pretty straightforward. What gets measured gets improved. We can have KPIs. We can have all these different types of things and metrics within our businesses. But when you talk about being a dad, or being specifically a stepdad in this case, right, that's difficult to do. So where do I go to is I'm always constantly auditing what I'm up to, what I'm doing. And I'm just like anybody else, man. I've got my vulnerabilities. I've got my own internal issues. I got my own struggles. But I really do make it a point. Where do I start? Looking within, internal, and like you just mentioned, learning, because I've been a stepfather now it's going on 7 years. It's going on 7 years. I've stepdad to 2 daughters, 14 and 16, soon to be 17. And I've got 3 kids of my own. So you got that whole blend thing that was kind of going on there for a while. 2 of the kids now are adults, so always trying to look within. That's kind of where I start on those conversations. What do I need to be doing? How can I be better? How can I strive the conversation? How can I better connect? Especially because even with some of my own kids, there's not necessarily a disconnect, but we're different people. You know what I mean? That's all your kids are going to be different, right? And sometimes I think with the step girls, man, the daughters, I gotta take a better look inside and say, I need to be finding a better way to connect based on their interests, not mine, or pushing my points of views and stuff like that. So,
well, and that's a good point. It's, one of the biggest things, actually the biggest thing that when I did a poll and had a lot of conversation about the biggest challenge that stepdads face is discipline. And
Mm.
discipline, and having that conversation of discipline is not punishment. Discipline is teaching people, or discipline is learning, or discipline is a mindset of I'm dedicated to something, right? Discipline is unique from punishment. It's that we need to make sure that we separate those things. But then going deeper than that is some of the issues were, how do I have a strong relationship with my spouse so that we have a unified front and we have a strong relationship? And then you go a little bit deeper, and problems start getting with talking about how do I have a strong relationship with the stepkids? How do I build trust and build my relationship with them? And I think that when we start looking at some of these things, we start looking at just basic, not even like stepdad to stepchild. We're talking about basic relationship things, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if you're talking about your spouse, your child, your parents, your friends. You got to meet people where they are. You can't expect people to come to you, right? I mean, every once in a while, sure, we need some people to come to us and we have our bad days, but most of the time, if you want to build relationships, you got to be other people focused.
That's right. And I struggle with that. Truth be told, I became a father at the age of 19, and, so my story behind all that was I was a kid myself, you know what I mean? And I threw out those relationships, with my kids as they were coming into the world, and my ex-wife, now wife at the time, and there was a huge disconnect. We were never on the same page because it was almost like what you just said. Instead of trying to meet each other and kind of focus on what her needs were and what the kids' needs were, I was kind of waiting for that to come to me. Like you said that perfectly. And now that I can look back on it, since I'm going to be 43 years old, and there's some gray hairs, and I'm bald, at this point, man, talk about growth and learning. And the only thing that I knew to do is, especially when I came out of that relationship for 13 years with my ex-wife and with the kids, and I had to really go down a journey of self-development and personal development and say, wow, this didn't happen overnight. Number one. Number two, it's because managing the expectation wasn't there. We didn't communicate well. So when I got remarried, we founded our relationship on that communication and all of those things. Matter of fact, we dated for 2 years before we decided to get married. It just is, is what it is. Everyone does things differently. But those were the driving factors of our conversations over that period of time was, how are we going to do this with the kids? How are we going to blend these 5 kids together? I'm going to take on, two kids. And I knew that, we talked about this earlier. It's a choice. You're making that choice to do that. So one thing that we did right away was we started having the narrative. The narrative builds the culture of the family, does it not? So what we try to do is we didn't have those conversations externally or even internally of hers, mine. You know what I mean? We always talked about, we have 5 kids. Hey, James, how you doing, man? It's nice to meet you. Tell me about you and your wife. Well, that's my wife, Jamie, over here. We've got 5 kids. We've got 2 dogs. We just kind of got into that habit of doing it that way. And the kids pick up on that. They see that. They feel included, So I think that narrative and that culture, and like you said, kind of trying to meet and manage that expectation for us early on, that really helped, especially when you start getting into discipline. That's a big one. Yeah. That was a tough one. Kind of getting into that. The way I disciplined was a little bit different from her, but guess what? When you talk about that and you approach it not from punishment, but hey, this is the situation with what this kid did. What do you think? What do you think? What are your thoughts? And then having those conversations before just acting, it was worth its weight in gold.
So that's an interesting perspective where, I talk to some people who are, they don't have any kids of their own, and they come into a relationship, and there are some guys that have their own biological children. And then you got, my situation, I have biological children, but they're older. Right. And then now my fiance has 2 young children. So there's not quite as much potential conflict within the kids themselves because they're not living right, same age, all those kind of things. But, some of the same stories. My 2 stepchildren, the younger 2 stepchildren, their dad is involved in their life. He's an active father. They're actually over at his house. We do a week on, week off. He's involved in their life. He's engaged. What's that been like for you with your stepchildren and their biological father?
Man, isn't that crazy? That's why I love what you're doing with this, because the dynamic of stepdads can be so drastically different all the way throughout. My story, like I just kind of told you, it's been a blended family. My oldest is currently 23. I have a 20-year-old. Those are two boys. Then I have an 11-year-old daughter, so we can do the math on all that. And then the two stepkids are kind of there in the middle, right? Great point. In my case, I wish we had that. My wife and I discussed that. I actually wish that my stepdaughter's dad was active and in their life, and they could go to dad's house, just like my kids for years came to my house and had the shared parenting perspective. So I had a shared parenting agreement, this entire time with my ex-wife for the last decade. You know what I mean? Because that's kind of how I felt like I needed to do that. I wanted to run away when we first went through the divorce, man. I'm not going to lie to you. It was difficult. It was tough. You deal with these things, but the kids for me kept me rooted and stayed here. And then for my current wife with her two daughters, it was kind of the opposite. They were actually down in Florida, and I'm in Ohio. She was from Ohio, but their father was really not in the picture. He was not a part of that equation. He wasn't a every Wednesday and every other weekend or any of those things. Not attending, PTA meetings, not involved with the school, and none of those things, man. Really was an absentee father. Now, he would occasionally through his parents, the grandparents, while they were in Florida, kind of be involved, right? Because his mom and dad were there. But when he made a decision to move to Washington, D.C., when they were down in Florida, just kind of gave my current wife no notice, really. By the way, I'm moving to Maryland. That really solidified that aspect of being an absentee father. So with all that said, the dynamic now is he basically tries to communicate periodically through a text message or through a phone call with the two girls. And they've struggled with this immensely. I'm just being as open and vulnerable as I can be about this topic, and it's hard when you're the stepdad because you want to try to fill that role, but you can't force it. You can't force it. You kind of have to let it come naturally in some cases. The older girl, she's now going to be, I think I just said that, she'll be 17. She's 16 now. She came into my life at age 7. So where her mindset was, and she already kind of saw remnants of her father being absent, right? She grew up with me being her dad and latched onto that pretty quickly. Whereas the younger one, she was only 4, so she has these brief little moments and memories of going to daddy's house and having the ice cream and doing all the fun stuff, like a friend. And then when the two girls are of age where they've got a phone, they can communicate, and then dad tries to step in. He's put a lot of stuff on them, if that makes sense. And it's, been difficult to manage at times, and other times, we've just have to, figure it out. It's trial by fire in a lot of ways, even though it's been many years now. Because the kids turn into teenagers and, then they turn into adults, and you get the idea. So and that's been that dynamic
that we as stepdads, we need to understand, even in your situation where you're stepping in and you're probably more of a dad to these girls than their actual dad. And even though he's still kind of around, we need to realize that we might feel like we're coming in and we're doing this great thing. But having a stepdad come into a child's life is very likely going to register to the child as an additional loss before it registers as a bonus or as an addition to, right? Even if you're a great guy and you come in and you do all the right things, they still have to go through the grieving process, which is going to be different for everybody, because they're going to register this as, oh, well, I guess mom and dad aren't ever getting back together again. Like that's a loss that we have to respect, that the child is going to have to go through, and they may not go through it right away, or it may not be very strong, but they're going to go through it.
That's right. And that maturation process for kids is what it is, right? It's different for every for every kid. It's different from boys to girls, all these different things. So when you look at that period in the kid's life, when you're now becoming that stepdad, like you just mentioned, again, I kind of go back to audit, what gets measured gets improved. I always try to look within and try to measure and see how the kids are doing and say, what do I need to do here? Talk to my current wife about it, try to get on the same page. And Plenty of times I failed, trust me. I mean, that's a part of this process as well. But at the same time, not trying to come in and force that, and realizing that the 7-year-old at that time specifically, she was going through that. She was going to go through the process of, man, my dad's moving away from me. My dad's not going to be here. And then in a short time after that, bringing the kids back up to Ohio and trying to build a family, right? A couple years later, and those processes, where the younger one, she's still trying to figure out what this stuff even means, 4, 5, 6 years old. And then I have my daughter who's 11 now. She was 1 when my ex-wife and I separated, and she gained a stepfather probably by age 2. So for her, growing up and becoming, infant, and all that stuff, she didn't really know that dynamic of having a dad and losing him, right? It's just interesting. There's all these different dynamics that can be at play, and managing those expectations can be difficult.
Yeah, well, and helping them through it, right? Because ultimately, our job as parents or as step parents is to help a young human grow into a productive adult human, right? It's not about, and I put something out in a couple of the stepdad groups, and I think some people actually misunderstood, but there were some people that actually got pretty upset that I basically said that a child's job is not to make you happy or proud. It's not their job. Their job is to grow up and be their own person. It has nothing to do with making you happy. If what you do as a parent, if you get pride, or you feel some type of good emotion associated with, oh, look at my child and them growing and all that stuff, it has nothing to do with you. It has to do with everything to do with you trying to guide them so that they can figure their own way, right? Your happiness and your pride is irrelevant to the life of a child. There is definitely, and that's where the confusion came in. People were like, oh, that's, some hippie bullshit. And I'm like, no, dude, like it's real. Like your expectations and I don't mean expectations as far as like standards and accountability. Like, yeah, we're parents, we're going to have standards and accountability. But, when it comes to expectations, like what expectations are you laying on your kids? That's what I'm referring to here. And
no, it's a great point, man. If I can just pivot on it for a second, it's the same analogy as if you throw your kids in sports, because we have all these dads and stepdads, I'm sure it's the same for moms and stepmoms, but, maybe you've got that void in your life where you didn't participate in sports, or you exit out of sports early. Now you're throwing your kid into that arena to make you happy, to kind of help fill that void. We see that all the time.
Yeah, that's totally true. So I want to hit on, I want to finish this one point, and then I want to go on to something else you talked about. So when we're talking about the different levels, right? Everybody experiences things different, and we're a mixture between nature and nurture. And some people can go through something and be just fine, right? Yeah. To a certain degree. Other people are going to have significant hardship associated with it. Well, we need to realize that everybody's going to experience this differently. And especially in your situation, not only are they different personalities, but they're different ages as they experience this stuff. We need to have a lot of empathy towards our children and our stepchildren and what they're going through, because we may look at somebody, and again, going back to having a 21 and a 25-year-old, I might look at my 21-year-old daughter and think, wow, I don't know why she's having such a bad day. It's really not that big of a deal. Well, really for her, whether you're talking about a 21-year-old, a 15-year-old, a 5-year-old, doesn't matter. It might be the most significant thing and the most difficult thing that they've ever had to face. And your experience should not minimize that. So we need to be very respectful about what the kids might be experiencing as they're going through this, because think about how traumatic a divorce is for us. Right. And I know what I went through, and it was tough, man. I can't imagine what it would have been like if my kids would have been younger. So we need to be more respectful of that and understand that they might need somebody to talk to as well, and really your job as a parent is to love them and teach them and encourage them through this thing as best as you can. We just need to be more aware of how those things affect them.
Yes. Awareness is the key there. And unfortunately, because I can speak to this very well, I wasn't really aware, for a lot of periods of time, with my own kids who were battling the divorce from taking in step kids. You know what I mean? I mean, I'll be honest with you. I've got a 23 and 20-year-old, and we had a little bit of a minor situation occur from that divorce life. That's all I'm really going to say. Kind of reared its ugly head just a few weeks ago, man. And us and the family had to kind of go through that and deal with it. And it was kind of like, an opportunity. It was an opportunity. We saw it as an opportunity to maybe have a discussion, have some conversations about some things that didn't take place when they were 10 and 13, or all through that process of getting through it. So really great point. Awareness is key, but you've got to be willing to open yourself up to be aware and not just take this, because I struggle with that, man. 100%. My biggest issue is like, that's nothing. What are you upset about? What are we crying for? Especially now when I grew up primarily, like I told you, I had my first kid at 19 in my first life in terms of marriage and kids with boys, a little bit of a different situation. Now it's all girls. It's heavy girls. And I love it. But there's a lot of stuff going on there, man, that I'm just like, I don't get this. What is she crying about right now? I mean, great case in point, just to kind of have fun with this, is we have an older gentleman. He's got to be in his 90s, late 80s, early 90s. He lives a couple doors down. My daughter came home from work the other day and saw him out just getting his mail, and she was in tears. Like, oh my God, I can't, from a position of empathy and, and all that stuff. I'm just like, I don't get this. What are we crying about? So I don't know. Good points, man. It's just, I've tried to do a lot better of a job in the last probably just couple years. Recently, unfortunately, I wasn't all aware and all in on this, probably as I should have been. But that's why platforms like this and podcasts like this, initiatives like you've got, are very helpful. I wish I'd have been doing this 10 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Having these conversations and saying, oh man, I can openly talk about being a stepdad. We can share the wins and the losses together. We can do those things, because otherwise we're all just going through it ourselves.
Yeah. And it's funny you bring that up. The whole idea of, when's the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. When's the second best time today? Right. So, because I think about that too. I mean, from my second marriage, I've got a stepson who's now 19, and, based on some of the things that happened when that marriage broke up, there was actually some barriers put between me and him by his mom. And it was only recently that we reconnected after a significant amount of time, like several years. And we're still not really connected. We just happened to talk on the phone one day, and standing out in front of Target on the phone crying, looking like a big baby. But I'm like, hey man, I finally got to talk to my stepson after a couple of years. It was a big deal. Very big deal. It's stuff like this is important. And I think about, man, I could have started this thing 16 years ago and got some great benefit from it. But you know what? Here we are, and we're doing it. So I wanted to hit on also, you had a good point about the communication between you and your spouse. So let's dive into that one, because that's another big concern, is how do you make sure that regardless of your situation, whether you have kids or not, you're coming into a relationship with somebody who has children. Those are not your kids. And whether they have a dad or not, they have a mom, and they already have other people in their lives. And so you gotta be more aware and deliberate. And that's one of my favorite words anymore, is being more deliberate about having conversations so that not only you and your spouse have a strong relationship, and I'm a big proponent of spouse first households, have a strong relationship with your spouse, but then also being very deliberate, having very deliberate conversations about what kind of house do we want to build. Kind of, like you talked about, I don't have stepkids, I have kids. Right. And what does it mean, and how do you build that? So what was that conversation with you and your spouse like when you said you were dated for 2 years before you got married? What kind of conversations did you guys have, and when? Yeah,
great question. So for us, we both have come from, this was round 2 for both of us. And, you try to be a little bit on the picky side if you're going to go down this road of really, really dating somebody, you know what I mean? Because especially when they have kids and that are potentially involved. The way we both looked at that, number one, was like, if this is going to be a match for me, he has kids, she has kids. So let's start that conversation now, So we were very open about the kids, number one, what they're up to, what they're doing. It wasn't just like, and I'm going to go on record and say this too, by the way, this was a long distance relationship. And for us, we both talk about this all the time. The value in that long distance at that time, when you go all in on each other, is you have nothing to do but communicate. We would see each other about once a month, and we traded. I would go to Florida for about 3 to 5 days every month. And then it was her turn. She'd come up to Ohio for 3 to 5 days. That way we could make sure we had ample time to plan for the care of the kids, who's doing what. So it wasn't just like, oh my God, I'm all so in love. Here's a brand new relationship. Forget about the kids, right? So that was important. The second part of that is we didn't really introduce the kids to our real relationship for about a whole year. You know what I mean? They were cognizant that we were dating somebody, but it wasn't a thing where we felt like we had to do that right away. So the reason I say that is because when you're dating, everything's new. It's exciting, correct? I mean, you can't wait to see somebody. And I think oftentimes in any relationship, this has nothing to do with just round 2 or round 3, just any relationship, is you often forget about that connection point and you're looking to, hey, we're going to go have sex, or I'm going on a date. You know what I mean? I'm going out to the movies. It's all I care about. Whereas this forced us to really dive deep into who we are. What are we doing? What are our aspirations? So that's how that started, Neil. The second part of that was when about after that year, we started talking about the transition, which is a move. You get to that point, especially in long distance, like, hey, if we're going to continue this, someone's got to go somewhere. Are you coming to Ohio, or am I coming to Florida? The reality for us and our dynamic was, again, I had shared parenting. I was at home in Ohio. Remember, their kid's father tapped out. He had done tapped out. He's up in the DC area or whatever, and she could move with her kids. She's from Ohio. She kind of wanted to come back to Ohio, so it made sense. So that's when we started talking about right away. We want to manage things together as a family unit. We didn't want to focus on like I had said earlier, his, hers, that kind of a thing. You make the choice to be the stepdad. She makes a choice to be a stepmom. So we wanted the kids to understand, we're here for you, right? You got a soccer practice, man, I can't make it, but Jamie can take you. You know what I mean? And we also in my case, my ex-wife, who has the other part of shared parenting, she needed to understand that as well. This is how we choose to do this. Because I'll tell you, the way my ex-wife approached with her ex-husband now, it was kind of the opposite. It was, she had kids, he had a kid, and then they had a kid together. Okay. So now it's just a whole different dynamic. But we wanted to make sure that the kids knew we as a collective unit had their back. So it wasn't a thing where, sorry, I can't go get the kid from soccer practice. Now I'm putting it on on my ex-wife. I would just, hey, stepmom's here to do it. She's here to take care of you. You know what I mean? Hopefully that makes some sense. Those were really the guiding factors, really. I mean, I wish I could unlock some secret sauce here. It was really just 2 people saying, hey, the kids are important. We need to parent together at all times. Let's try to communicate on the discipline side before taking quick action and just like yelling and blowing up at a situation. It obviously doesn't work all the time. Okay. But we try to do that to our best of our ability. So the kid knew exactly that, hey, both of these parents here, mom and stepdad, are on the same team. And this is what the narrative is. This is what the direction is. This is the guidance. This is the approval. This is the advice, every step of the way. And what I really see myself as a stepdad is a little bit like, because I like what you said, our job isn't to make these kids, isn't for these kids to make us happy. We're there to grow them and nurture them and turn them into adults, fully functioning, independent adults, right? And I think mentor is a pretty good word for a step parent. I think that's a word that I would use. A term I would use is, I almost kind of even like it better than stepdad. I think stepdad sometimes has a negative connotation, just like the word failure. And it doesn't need to be. I don't like that stepdad. How often is that used in such an upbeat, charming, exciting manner? Oh, it's a stepdad. Oh, freaking stepdad's here, right?
Well, actually, I feel sorry for stepmoms, because I think stepmoms actually has an even stronger negative connotation to it. There's so many, evil stepmother, Cinderella stories.
I know.
I can't imagine. At least being a stepdad, you're like, oh, I got to step in and be a mentor, and like we kind of spin that a little bit. I think sometimes stepmoms get a really bad rap just for no reason.
100%. It's a running joke in our family. My wife, she said, she's like, now you're stuck with the evil stepmom today, or you're stuck with the evil stepmom taking here today. And obviously it's a joke, but because that narrative existed. So it's being used. But I like to say that, man, like we can be mentors to these kids and help share, especially when they've had different environments. You said that nature versus nurture. We're kind of a combination of those things as a collective, as people.
Yeah.
This is kind of your way to kind of inject, hey, here's some things that have worked for me, or here's some advice that I would give. Here's some absolute, especially because you have older kids, right? So do I. Man, here's when I really screwed up. Hey, babe, I really screwed up when this happened, when my kids were this age. Let's talk about that, because it's a failure point that I had that we could talk about. So,
and that comes up a lot with Cindy and I is, in fact, we had a couple conversations over the last couple of weeks where, I was starting to get really hard on him, and I don't know why. Just old habits, bad habits are going to pop up, and I think, to the stepdads that are out there listening is, yes, it's difficult, and I want you to continuously improve, but you're going to have your bad days. Even as you address, I am fully aware that my upbringing has caused significant anger issues in me, significant conflict resolution type issues where I've done a really good job over the last 5 to 10 years to overcome those things, but it's still there. And my old, really unhelpful parenting habits are still there, and they're going to pop up every once in a while. And you just have to accept that it happens. The most important thing is, the awareness, but then the willingness to take a step back and say, that was not a good moment for me. And I've given several between conversations that we've had, podcasts, and given examples of Cindy will call me out. And recently it's been, she sat me down. She's like, I don't like the way that you're handling your interactions with the kids. And it wasn't to the point where she was like, look, you fix this or I'm going to leave. It's not like that. Right. But it was just a very deliberate conversation where she sat me down and she said, this is not going well. And you need to fix it. And she was very direct with me that, yes, the kids are pissing you off and the kids are being whatever. But again, it's not about having kids that are going to please you. It's about me handling myself appropriately. And the kids they have their personalities. And I think one of it is, one of the kids I get along with fairly well. The other one, not so much. And I think it has nothing to do with him. It has to do with, he reminds me of his dad, and to be fully honest, I think it just kind of irritates me. And just saying that out loud is actually very freeing. And I said that to a couple people, because once you say it out loud, it's there. Now it's accountability. When we talk about empathy and accountability, there's no reason to hide anything. If we're going to be fully transparent and we're going to talk about accountability and improvement, we got to talk about it, man. If it's a problem, we need to talk about it, and taking responsibility for the fact that, he's a good kid and I'm treating him like shit because he reminds me of his dad. That's bad on me. It has nothing to do with he needs to change. The kid is who he is,
I'm really glad I don't mean that. I'm really glad that you opened up and said that, because I deal with it 100%. It's the same situation. I've got one that, like, her and I are like ride or dies. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know how she's not my kid. When I look at it, it's kind of odd. Then the other, man, you're right. We had a tough time on the connection part of it because of some of those things. She has some of these characteristics and traits of what you just said. And I find myself in the same boat. Like, there might be a couple of days go by where we don't really interact. And then what happens is, and I need it, I have to have it. My wife will sit down and she'll say, hey, I don't like the vibe here. I don't like how this is going here. You need to take a look at that. And then it's like, shit, okay, that's my reality check. It's kind of that audit thing, because sometimes and it doesn't have to be that you're yelling or even trying to parent or discipline. Sometimes you might just be silent, and that's not going well either, is it? You know what I mean? And it's understanding that. And like, thank God she'll perseverate on things maybe a little bit too long. To her, she'll say it. She would tell you that. But when she does, she says, hey, you need to do something here. You need to correct that. You need to fix it. And then I've identified that. I mean, maybe day one, years ago, I got defensive. I think a lot of us, our initial reaction to things is to become defensive.
Agreed.
And I know I was that way. And I'm kind of still that way, full transparency. I have to audit that emotion when it comes in and say, okay, there's a reason why this person is saying this to me. It's their perception of what's happening. They didn't make it up, right? I mean, there's a reason why they're feeling this way, and I have a huge role to play in it. So that comes to accountability, extreme ownership, taking it all in and saying, okay, let me dial this back a minute and find my ways to improve the situation.
Yeah, I like that. And I, I mean, every time I'm on the horn with, you or any of the other guys, like, this is the kind of stuff we can talk about all day long, man.
All day.
Being a dad
Yeah.
is amazing. I absolutely love being a dad. Being a stepdad has been even better, just because I get to be, it's like being a football coach, right? Like, I got a whole team of kids. I get to mentor all these kids, right? It's such an amazing opportunity. And I just love the thought that I can take a small role in a child's life. And in this case, it's a very large role, and try to make them better. And in order to help them mold themselves into who they want to be, I need to make sure that I'm not, I mean, really, it's like watering a plant. Like, the kid's going to grow up and he's going to do great things. I just got to not screw it up. Right.
Yeah. You got to make sure they keep growing.
Yeah. I just got to make sure that they're given opportunities and I guide them. I don't need to make them anything. They already are, right. They already got a personality. I just need to provide them opportunities. I need to provide them love and support and encouragement and empathy. And every once in a while say, hey man, that, no different than, Cindy coming to me and just saying, hey, you know what? You could have handled that a little bit better. I don't need to yell at them. They're not my kids. They have a dad. I don't need to be their dad. I just need to be a good, strong role model for them and a mentor to say, hey, you know what? Is there another way? And that's probably even better. I don't need to tell them what they could have done. Even the 7-year, he just turned 7 years old. I could sit him down and have a conversation and say, hey, this is what happened. How could you have handled that better? And he's going to tell me at 7 years old. He already knows. Right.
That's right.
So it's not like we need to do a lot. We just need to stop doing stupid shit.
Stop doing the dumb shit, man, and get out of your own head. And, because again, I was that guy, Neil. I was like, I would sit them down at 7, 8 years old and say, here's all the things that you did wrong. Here's how you could have made it better, and then finally, through thank God with my wife and going through, the communication and trying to work towards our own relationship. That's the rock right there, man. You got to build that foundation with with mom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because then you can build off of each other. But I had to realize, like, man, at some point, they don't give a shit what I'm saying now. It's going in one ear out the other.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's like realizing, wait a second, these kids they know what they did wrong. They don't need to hear just yet another dude here barking down their, or whatever the case is. And then it kind of pivoted to what you said is like, hey, you effed up here, right? Yes. Okay. Well, let's talk about that. You know what I mean? We had a great example, especially for the dads, moms out there who got the teenage drivers. You've already gone through it at least 3 times now, right? So we're on number 3 driving. I was out and about over the holidays and my wife was having a cookie making party, man. All the kids are in here. They're doing the cookies, all this stuff, right? I remember I was probably out buying more ingredients. And the bottom line is I get the call. It's my wife. She said, hey, she's like, you're not going to be happy with this phone call. I said, okay, well, what's going on? She's like, well, Michaela, she got into an accident with our friend Bonnie's car in the driveway. And I said, what do you mean in the driveway? How do you get into an accident in the driveway? Right? So I'm trying to rationalize what happened. And she's like, I'll explain it when you get here. She's like, but Michaela's extremely upset. Just try to be calm and cool, collective. Because I'm like, hey, these things happen. Tell her not to worry about it because she's scared. This is her first situation in an accident in the car. So I came home, cool, calm, collective. But let me tell you how bad she effed up. How do you total a car in a driveway? She did it. She did it. Just to kind of wrap up the story, she was backing the car out. She went to come back forward and her foot slipped because it was the winter. She hit this car. We ran at like 20 miles an hour in the driveway. But the old me, and that's why my wife did the right thing. She called just to say, hey, you're not going to be happy with this call. Let's just get on the same page here. Okay, this is what happened. Oh, okay. And it's not like I had to calm down or I was irate. It's not that. It was just like framing the situation for me so I could come home and be reacting the right way to how she was feeling about it. She already felt bad. She felt horrible, right? So, I mean, that's just a good example right there.
Right. Yeah, man. I think that shows that, you got a strong relationship with your spouse, strong communication. It's all about what can you do to help guide other people. And most of the time it's not about you. It's not
No.
even about you. It's about them. And so, and I think taking that approach, it takes it like it's no longer personal. Like, if my 9-year-old, just wants to go to bed and doesn't want to play games and, doesn't want to give me a hug tonight, it's not about me. Right. It's
Right.
about him. And, I just have to be ready when he is ready. So I think those are all really good, strong messages.
Yeah.
And it's just good stuff, man. I appreciate you being part of the community. You are in the
My pleasure.
Champion Stepdad group. Now you're, a 2-time guest on the show. I love it.
Yeah.
So yeah, man, keep engaging. And then I know you've got a project that you just released that I was all excited about. So real quick, what are you working on?
Oh, well, thanks for bringing that up, man. I appreciate that, man. So I've started a group called the Golden Collective. My last name's Golden. I figured I gotta do something with his damn last name, right? So no, the long and short of it was it's GOALDEN, the Golden Collective. I wanted to build a community of like-minded individuals. That's what it's all about. That are goal-oriented, high performers, small business owners, entrepreneurs. You don't have to own your own business to be goal-oriented, right? At the same time, hammering in the golden rule, do unto others as you'd have done unto you. I think that's very important. That was pivotal with the last name Golden growing up. Come on, right? And I really think that there's a disconnect in society in a lot of cases right now, a lot of places. You see it all over the place where we don't really respect our brethren, man, our brothers and sisters out there. I love seeing people win. I'm a champion for others winning. I want to be able to celebrate those things, not be jealous or envious. And that's what it's all about. It's a free community right now. So if anyone's interested in that and if this resonates, come on over, man. Come on over to the Golden Collective. You can search on Facebook and find it and just come on into the group, add value and connect and introduce yourself. Simple as that.
I'll drop the link in the show
Appreciate
notes. Yeah, man. And I'm all about collaboration, man. Like I said earlier, from, several people I've talked to in Front Row Dads from, your new initiative. I've got other Facebook groups that I'm involved in, the Stepdad's Den. And, I'm not here. I have my eye on building something, right? And I'm creating curriculum, and I'm going to do a membership group, and it's going to be low cost to entry because I just want to collaborate with people. And if people aren't just in paying the money to be part of that, there's always the podcast, right? There's always the conversation. And I don't care if you don't want to be part of this group, just go find a group, right? Because it's about building your band of brothers. It's about building a trusted group of people that can hold you accountable, that you can lean on, right? But then you can also be there for them. And so, I'm not trying to populate my group just to populate my group. I want the people that want to be here. And if this group isn't for you, then I encourage you to go find something. Go find something, because there's plenty out there. Whether you're talking about, being a stepdad, being a dad, being a man, right? There's a bunch of mentoring groups out there just for men in general, just like, because, life's tough. But then also, we talk about the 365 Driven as a business group we're part of. You talk about the Arte Syndicate that you've been in. I'm not part of it, but that's cool, right? Like, I don't need to be yet, at least. But there's a lot of groups out there, and I appreciate people that create space for others, because not everybody wants to be in charge. Not everybody has the mentality or the personality or the time to create something like this. They just want to be a part of it. So I encourage you, if you're listening, go find your group, man. And if you're a stepdad, join Champion Stepdad Facebook group. Look up James group. I'm going to put the link in the show notes. And if nothing else, look up on the Champion Stepdad Facebook group. He's going to be in there. You can connect with him there. And James, you have my permission. Drop a note in the Stepdad Facebook group and let people know what you're doing. Yeah, man. I mean, why not? It's about collaboration. I don't want a million people coming in here selling stupid shit, but I know that's not what you're doing. You're creating a great space for people. So look for that in the Facebook group. We're going to be doing, I imagine you and I are going to be doing a lot of collaboration.
Look forward to it, man.
Real soon, man. This is good stuff, dude. I really appreciate your time. It's been a pleasure having you on. I'm sure this is not going to be the last one.
The pleasure's all mine, man. Appreciate your platform and giving me kind of a sounding box as well, man, because I need it just like all the other stepdads out there. So thank you.